Is painting shadows a challenge or even a mystery for you? If so, let me show you some of the things I've learned about them that I hope will help you in your artistic journey. By the way, my name is Lee Tako. I've been a professional artist for over 25 years and have been teaching for over 15 years. On this channel, I'm going to show you the knowledge and concepts that took me from being a frustrated novice to a nationally published and award-winning artist. If you like what I'm doing here, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe, and also click the notification bell. Now let's get started. On sunny days, you can think of shadows as a darker, cooler version of the color in the sunlit area. This is the basic general principle. Also on a sunny day, you have two light sources. You have the sun, which is incredibly bright and is very warm in temperature. Now, the second light source is one that most people usually don't think about, and that is the cool blue sky light. It's very cool, it's very weak compared to the sun, and it is going to create the color that you're going to see in most cast shadows on a sunny day. Now, it's important to note that what we're going to be talking about today only applies to shadows on a sunny day. An overcast light, indoors, situations like that, the shadows are going to behave a lot differently. One of the keys to understanding shadows on most any object is to understand planes and the angle of planes in relation to the light source. I'm going to use the image of a simple rock to illustrate this concept. Every facet or plane on a rock contains within it its own distinct color and value. And all else being equal, that color or value will be determined solely by the angle of that facet in relation to the light source. So you might be thinking, what did he just say? So I'm going to break this down into just 5 separate zones that I think is going to make it easier for you to see. So the first plane is a highlight plane. This one faces the sun directly, therefore it is the lightest in value, and usually it's slightly warm in color temperature. That said, there are some artists, including myself, who sometimes will paint this slightly cool to really capture the effect of intense sunlight bouncing off of it. So we're going to call our next plane the light plane. Now this one faces the sun not directly, but it's turned a little bit away, and it's going to be a little darker in value than the highlight plane, and it's also going to be warmer too, though this can vary depending on its angle in relation to the light source. So now we move on to the shadow side of the rock, and we're going to call this one the shadow plane. Now remember how we said earlier that the blue sky light is also a light source? Well, this plane faces toward that cool blue sky. As a result, it's going to be very cool in color temperature, and its value is also going to be darker than the light plane. Okay, next is the ambient shadow plane. Now this is where shadows get really exciting and really interesting. This plane, unlike the shadow plane, it faces downward, so it does not pick up any of the cool blue sky light. Instead, the light it's usually picking up is going to be ambient reflected sunlight that's bouncing off the ground or some other nearby object. Depending on the strength of the sunlight, also on the color temperature of the object that's reflecting the sun, as well as how close that object is to our rock, that can have varying effects on the value and the color temperature of the ambient shadow plane. However, it must be noted that the value of the ambient shadow plane should never be painted as light as the light plane. And the last area we're going to talk about is the shadow accent. This is an area, usually at the bottom of a rock where it meets the ground, where you're not going to get either blue sky light or ambient light going into that area. So there's no light at all. As a result, it's going to be very dark in value, and it's usually going to read as very warm. Okay, I have this simple rock that I purchased that has very clear facets on it, which is going to help us to be able to clearly see the principles we discussed. Now, rocks in nature are a bit more complex, but this will help you to at least give you a good starting point. This is our highlight plane right here. This is facing most directly toward the sun. It is the lightest in value, and it's somewhat warm. This here would be the light plane. Now, this one is going to be, you can see it's a little bit darker in value, and it's generally going to be a little warmer. We do have some slight color temperature shifts here in the local color, but I think it still illustrates a point pretty clearly. This is our shadow plane right here, and as I angle, if I angle this rock this way, it clearly picks up some of that cool blue skylight that we were talking about. Now, an important thing to notice is down in here would be our accent, because you can see it gets very dark right in this area down in here as compared with this. So this is a lot darker and warmer. This is a lot cooler and lighter. However, this does not get as light as this plane or this plane here, which is facing toward the sun. It's very important to be aware of that. Now, if I take this rock and I tilt it this way, I'm creating another shadow under here, but that shadow is going to be warmer because of all the ambient light, sunlight that's hitting this area right here and bouncing up into that area there. That, of course, is our ambient shadow plane. So these angles and planes we just talked about, they don't apply just to rocks. They apply to most anything you're going to see. Take a tree, for instance, and if you simplify that tree, simplify the individual leaves into masses of foliage, and then look at the planes and angles on those masses of foliage. Some are going to face toward the sun, they're going to be lighter. Some are going to face toward the blue sky on the shadow side, they're going to be darker and cooler. Then you're going to have some areas of the foliage that might face toward the ground, and they're going to start to pick up some of that warm ambient light bouncing off the ground. And then you'll have some areas that go way deep inside the foliage that don't get any light, and are going to read as very dark. It's important to note that this is just a starting point. It's to help you see the general concept. Life is a lot more complicated. Going back to our example of a rock, you're going to have multiple facets, and you're even going to have facets upon facets. Now, that can be pretty daunting when you're out there. But your best bet as an artist is to identify the basic facets using the principles we just discussed and get those blocked in your painting, and then worry about the smaller little variations within there if they're even needed at that point. Another thing to remember is that the opposite can be true. Every rock you encounter out there may not have all 5 planes that we discussed. For instance, if the rock is just sloping down upward on the shadow side and it doesn't angle down anywhere, you're only going to have the general shadow plane. There's not going to be the ambient shadow plane that we talked about. Also, you might not see the shadow accent anywhere just because of the way the rock goes into the ground, or if there's grass around it and things like that. It's also to note that there are going to be anomalies out there in nature. The things I just showed you are general principles that you will encounter many times when you're out there in a sunny day situation when looking at rocks or other objects. But things can throw it off. You can have local color things happening where the one side of the rock might not have moss on it and it has sunlight on it, and the other side has this green moss, which is going to warm it up. It's going to totally kill the effect of blue skylight in the shadow area in that particular situation. So just be aware of anomalies because they are out there. Now let's talk briefly about cast shadows. Cast shadows are a lot of times going to be on a flat plane, not always, but they're usually going to be facing upward to some degree. As a result, they're usually going to be on the cool side. They're going to be pretty much the same principle as the shadow side of the rock. 2 important things to keep in mind about cast shadows is as they get closer to the object that's creating them, their source object, they're usually going to be a little darker and even a little warmer in color temperature. And also the edges of them are going to be sharper. And as the shadows move further out from their source, which you're usually going to see more in like morning or evening situations, that area of the shadow is usually going to get cooler and it's going to get slightly lighter in value. And the edges are going to be a little more diffuse, a little softer. And if the shadows get smaller or thinner, they're going to be even more light and softer as well, and that's because of the principle of diffraction. Now let's look at how these cast shadows behave in an actual setting. So we have right here, this is where the cast shadow starts, and if you look carefully, you see how it's a little darker and warmer in here, and as that cast shadow comes out to here, it gets a little bit cooler. It starts to shift a little more toward blue because we have influence of that blue skylight coming in and affecting this area more. Also, the shadow is a little sharper right here, and it gets a little bit softer as we move out. Now this is a very short cast shadow. It's not even a foot long. You're going to see this a lot more pronounced with bigger cast shadows out in nature. So if you have a long cast shadow, make that a little lighter and a little cooler and a little softer as it moves away from its source. So what color are shadows? Well, that depends on several factors. One of them being the light source, and the other one being the angle of the plane that the shadow happens to be on. The exact mixing of shadow colors for a particular painting is going to depend on the light source being depicted in that painting, as well as the color relationships. A good starting point is to know your color wheel, and to not treat shadows as merely just a dark version of the sunlit area, but rather as its own unique shape of color and value. So in other words, what you're going to ask yourself is, what value and what color is that shadow shape and compared with the sunlit area? How much darker is that shadow compared to the sunlit area? And how much cooler or possibly warmer it is compared to the color that represents the sunlit area. Here's one practical way to help you think about this with color mixing. Let's say I have a sunlit area that's red, and that's being represented by either scarlet or a cadmium red light. My shadow area is not just going to be a black added to that, but it's going to be better to choose a color such as alizarin crimson or magenta, and then I would probably neutralize that with something like maybe a little bit of yellow ochre. I might even add some viridian in there to neutralize it a little bit as well, but that's going to get you a lot closer than just adding lamp black or ivory black to that area. Also, let's say we're going to paint some grass in sunlight, and the grass is going to be represented by the color cadmium green, which is a lighter yellower green. My shadow color, I might start out with something like viridian. Viridian by itself is going to be probably too cold and too intense. So I'm going to neutralize that with a red or a yellowish red, something like burnt sienna or yellow ochre. Now you probably notice you don't have to go very far in the color wheel to go from the sunlit area to the shadow area. Usually a warm version of a color such as a scarlet or cadmium red light for your red, and then magenta for the shadow color, somewhat neutralized, is going to get you there. Now some people might ask, well, what about black? And black you have to be very careful with, also something like Payne's gray, because if you just use black, it's usually going to just be a dead color in there. Black is devoid of color. So black by itself is not going to work. Now, some artists will use black to somewhat neutralize a color. Like they might add a little bit of black to, say, a viridian in a green situation, or maybe to a magenta in a red situation. And that can work with great effect. I've known artists who've done that very well and been very successful with that. But you have to be careful, because in that situation, they're just using black as a modifier. They're not using it as a standalone shadow color. Same thing with Payne's gray and other dark neutrals like that. So if you treat shadows as their own area of color and value, you're going to be a lot closer to seeing how they really are and understanding them. Now I'm going to be giving out copies of this illustration I created of the different light and shadow planes on rocks during my talk and demonstration at the upcoming Plein Convention and Expo in Branson, Missouri next month. Now I'd love to see you there if you can make it, but if you can't, I'd still like to give you a copy of this illustration. If you'd like one, just click on the link below in this video and it'll take you to a page where you can enter your email, and then you will receive an email with access to this file that you could use for your own personal studio study and plein air painting. So let me know in the comments below if you found this helpful, and also what are the struggles that you have with painting shadows. And I'd also like to hear from you on what other subjects you would like me to make videos about, or what other challenges you are having as an artist. So thank you very much for watching, and remember to see the beauty and paint the journey.